Good morning to one and all, and hearty welcome to the participants who are present here. I, Dr. Bhaskar Sudha, Head Department of English, and the coordinator of this webinar at St. Joseph's College for Women, Autonomous Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh, India, sincerely thank all the participants for joining us for the 3-day international webinar titled Career and Professional Development for Aspiring Graduates, organized by Department of English in collaboration with IQAC with on 18 to 20th May 2020, and the resource person for this webinar is Ms. Vicky Hale, English Language Fellow, Almina, and US Department of State. This webinar is divided into 3 sessions. Session 1 on 18th May, which is going to start just a short while from now, and titles deals with preparing for job search, reflecting the past experiences. 19th May, session 2, day 2, starts with writing a winning resume. 20th May, day 3, session deals with success in interviews. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any queries during the presentation, please type your questions at the end of the chat box panel, where your questions will be addressed at the end of the session. Now, moving further, welcome address will be given by Dr. Sister Shaiji, Principal, St. Joseph's College for Women, followed by the rationale presented by Dr. Nalini Datta, and the introduction of the resource person will be done by Sister Lata. Over to Dr. Sister Shaiji.
Good morning, one and all. I am Sister Shaiji from St. Joseph's College for Women, Autonomous, Visakhapatnam. It is my privilege to welcome all of you to this 3-day international webinar. St. Joseph's College for Women, established in the year 1958, became autonomous in 1987. As a composite college, we offer intermediate, undergraduate, and postgraduate courses in arts, commerce, science, and management. We have conducted many seminars and workshops, both international and national, for faculty and students for the past 60 years. Due to COVID-19 scenario, we are exploring possibilities to reach out to the faculty and students through webinars as well. Physical distancing is the catchword of the day. We accept this challenge as an opportunity to conduct many webinars in the days to come. I am sure the participants of this webinar will acquire the required knowledge and skills in writing a winning resume and the skill to face interviews confidently. I thank Ms. Vicky A. Hale, an alumna of English Language Fellow, U.S. Department of State, for accepting our invitation to be the resource person of this program for all 3 days. I wish the organizers, the Department of English, St. Joseph's College for Women, and the participants of the webinar all the best and God's blessings. Over to Dr. Nalini Datta, Head of the Department of English PG.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Nalini Datta, Assistant Professor of English at St. Joseph's College for Women, Autonomous, and I head the PG Department of English. I am here today to present the rationale of this webinar. Educators and students today have been meeting in very unusual circumstances on very unusual platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, YouTube, etc., necessitated, of course, by the outbreak of COVID-19. Though the coronavirus has wrought widespread human and economic devastation, for the educators and their wards particularly, It has been a wake up call, a great eye opener, in the sense that it has reminded us that technology as a teaching tool and a learning tool has immense potential, and meeting here to conduct a seminar on the World Wide Web is evidence of that. So today, though we are sitting in our homes in different geographical locations, we are still able to meet in a virtual seminar hall. This 3-day webinar is on professional and career development for aspiring graduates. There is an urgent need in the student community to think seriously about the importance of employability skills and the need to acquire them at the graduate and the postgraduate level. There are several complexities surrounding employability in terms of the variety of perspectives on employment that each organization has. And therefore, students might have to rethink on certain assumptions and prejudices that they may have about employment and issues related to employment. Teachers, too, have to constantly remind themselves that producing employable graduates is also part of the education process, which, among other things, should also focus on developing all informative and social skills and personal attributes as well. It is to this end that this webinar is organized, and we hope that all of you will benefit greatly from our endeavors. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sister Lata, Assistant Professor of English at St. Joseph's College for Women Autonomous. I am very privileged to introduce our resource person, Ms. Vicky Hale, a renowned speaker. Dear participants, let me make it clear to you that whatever I am going to say about Vicky is a drop in the ocean. She is from Atlanta, Georgia, and since childhood, Vicky has been interested in different cultures and languages. English is her first language, and she has also learned French, Spanish, and Russian, and hopes to learn some Telugu as well. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration and her Master of Education degree in TESOL, that is, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, and World Language Education. She, her husband, and son spent 11 years in Central Russia, where she first began to teach English to speakers of other languages. The last 10 years in Atlanta, she taught in various schools, colleges, and applied her language skills to private tutoring with business professionals. She has been in India for 9 months as an English language fellow with the US Department of State and now an alumna. She arrived in Visakhapatnam mid-August 2019 and began designing courses and teaching PG, UG, and community college students at St. Joseph's College for Women Autonomous. Since her arrival, she has been invited to give many guest lectures to different colleges and universities. Indeed, the Department of English at St. Joseph's College is happy to have her as a colleague and even more pleased to be part of sharing knowledge to the other students. Vicky views the English language as a door to global relationships and an opportunity to assist the undeserved in pursuing dreams and changing the world for the better. This webinar is one of the ways in which she wishes to impart her skills as an English language teacher. Hope this webinar assists your career and professional development. Let us now begin our first session titled Preparing for Job Search and Reflecting on Past Experiences. So, I wish you all the best for the webinar. Now, I hand over the mic to Vicky. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you all are being cautionary and staying safe. It's nice to be with you today. You know, when lockdown first began nearly 2 months ago, I was kind of lighthearted about it all. I was relaxed, and for me anyway, it was a time to enjoy my husband and watch a few movies, even work on some new curriculum ideas, thinking I would be ready when the virus ended and everything went back to normal. And now the idea of normal is taking on a whole new look. But it's not my job to predict the future or try to guess what it will be like post-COVID-19. I do think it is my job and your job to face the situation and take an honest look at who you are and the way that you live, and whether or not you are prepared for the next thing that may occur. Yes, it's a time for reflection. And I think reflection is much more crucial today than ever before. Let's not slack off during this time of lockdown. So because of the unknown, reflection, getting in touch with who I am and what I know, is more crucial than ever. I would like to ask you today to really engage, not just to sit back and think, oh, another English class. Rather, open the eyes of your heart and your mind to think about your life and your own engagement, involvement in the reality and the reality of the unknown. Because truth be told, never has it been so important to be ready to know who I am and the way I think for whatever is to come. This is not just a listening exercise. I want you to be actively participating in your own future. You know, there's an old saying by a famous educator, John Dewey. He said, "We don't learn from experience. We learn by reflecting on experience." And today, I'm first going to reflect on what it means to reflect. We'll reflect on our own lives and then some of our perceptions and the future workplace. We want to look at our own biases, discrepancies, and places that we might be stuck. This is often called deconstruction, when we take things apart to have a better look. We'll talk about using reflection to uncover a bit of ourselves, and then we'll consider reconstruction. And finally, I'm going to talk about metacognitive development, which is not as bad as it seems. This will help you look at your own learning challenges, to think critically, and to put into practice what you are learning. Because if you've ever thought about your own life philosophy, or your reason for being here, or your mission in life, this is never a better time than today to begin to think about that. When you think about the idea of searching for a job. So let's begin with reflection. What is reflection? Well, first of all, light is reflected, as is sound, and as is our image when we look in a mirror. So it's something that comes back to us. When we reflect on our day or our past, we think deeply and seriously. We think beneath the surface. Events come back to our memory, and we consider the dimensions and different aspects of something. We need to look at our own past and our biases, our prejudices, and even our outlooks, the way that we see things. This is often called autobiographical inquiry. We're going to do that a little bit today in a moment. And this will come first because it gives us insight into our own lives. And that will affect our career, our interactions, and our relationships with people at any level. We'll do this in just a moment. But I want you to understand the full meaning of reflection. It's more than just autobiographical inquiry. Reflection is also a process. Remember the old adage, the journey is as important as the destination? Well, that's what I want you to think about. It involves looking at what's practical and even philosophical. So reflection is also analytical. You'll be looking at underlying principles and beliefs that might be exhibiting themselves in your own attitudes or in your own interactions. But there's a third part of this definition that really is important. So first it's autobiographical and then it's analytical, but it's also a tool that we use to help us realize our own learning styles and challenges and successes and even our own obstacles. This is called metacognitive development. We're looking back in order to move forward. Metacognitive development, just think of that big word as becoming a lifelong autonomous learner. And that's the goal, right? We don't want to always depend on our teachers as much as we might love them. We also want to be independent and autonomous in our learning. To know how I think, how I process information, how I or you can work independently, and as well work in teams, as well as learning new concepts on the job. So those are the three parts of reflection that I want you to keep in mind as you do this pre-resume and pre-interview lesson. So first, let's look at autobiographical inquiry. When you look at your life and you look back on your life, you begin to see things that you have in common with people, similarities, but you also begin to see differences. And you need to be keenly aware of those differences in people, in cultures, and in interactions. The first step in rethinking our own history and future work is to make a space, make a time for you to do this, so that you'll be able to expose and deconstruct your assumptions. I'll talk about assumptions in just a moment. I guess you could call this interrogation of the self. All right? We all have an identity, a personal identity, but we also have a career identity. And those two things are intertwined. So it's crucial today to look at all kinds of issues such as gender or racial issues or caste oppression, even privilege, and how it has impacted your own life. So let me just talk for a minute about assumptions before we go on. Assumptions are very varied. There are all kinds of assumptions. If we assume that because someone's political views are different from ours, that they're wrong, that's an assumption. Sometimes we assume that homelessness is a choice. That's an assumption. Or assuming that depression is a sign of weakness. Or sometimes we assume that if I ignore the problem, maybe it'll just go away. Sometimes we assume that we need to be perfect. Or you assume that you just can't do something, when the truth is that you can do anything that you put your mind to, if you want it bad enough. This is the way that it's always done, is something that we often say. And here I am at a college who is saying, let's try something new, Vicki. I really appreciate that, because sometimes there's a different way and sometimes there's a better way. So there are many assumptions, and I'm not going to go through my whole list, but I want you to also think about assumptions being expectations, because sometimes we have expectations and those expectations are unfulfilled. And unfulfilled expectations often lead to anger, or they lead to resentment. And those things are kind of in the back of our minds, and you need to become aware of that before you go out into the world where you have many different kinds of people and many different situations. So I really want you to sit down and make a space and think about your life. I'm going to give you an example in just a moment, one of the ways to do that. So the aim is to deconstruct, in other words, to look at the familiar and take it apart. Recognize your biases, your frustrations. We also want to identify any prejudices or privilege that we have noticed in our lives and allow our interests and insights to change. As we begin to notice these things, we think about how might they change so that we have a healthy outlook and so that we can embrace all kinds of people. One of the exercises that I have used in my classes here in India, and the students love it, but it's an assignment that I had when I was working on my master's degree about looking at where I come from. And I'm actually going to read you my poem, and then I'm going to give you a template. And this is a great tool, a great exercise for you to look at things in your past that may be affecting your present. This is called, the original poem, by the way, was written by George L. Lyon, and it's called Where I'm From. And I'll show you later a template that you can access on the internet. Okay. I am from military bases, schools every 3 years, sibling rivalry and differences unnoticed. I am from casseroles and French bread, tacos and black beans, escargot on the Champs-Élysées, borscht, pilmeni, and plof, ants in my coffee. I am from Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, and Joan Baez, Janis Joplin, and Helen Reddy. I am woman. I am from When in Rome, do as the Romans, do unto others, and never met a stranger. I am from Knowing Jesus, always learning, age has no meaning, and all people matter. I am from over half a century of learning from mistakes, worshiping God who gives second chances, a husband and child at 40, new beginnings, new seasons, new chapters unfolding. So this is a great thing to sit down with, to really look at your past. And this is a template. Now, you don't have to try to screenshot this or anything. You can find this online. Just search I am from or where I'm from template, and it will come up. And then you'll be able to write your own poem if you need a little help, because it gives you the different things to look at, family members, things that you were told all the while growing up, things that you wish that you didn't remember, but it really helps you to look at your background. So you're looking back in order to move forward, not to feel resentful, but to say, where do I need to change? What do I need to look at in my deconstruction? Okay, so remember, deconstruction is not destruction. You're not destroying anything. You're taking things apart to look at your past, the feelings, biases, viewpoints. And you have to ask yourself some good questions. So this is a good time to ask yourself questions before you go on your interview and other people are asking you questions. Ask yourself, what were you feeling in this situation? Are things said to me echoing in my mind or in my heart? Like somebody might have said to you, you should be ashamed of yourself, or you shouldn't associate with that kind of people. Do those things reverberate in your mind that are maybe coloring the way that you view people or situations? Are other people's viewpoints coloring your views? Are you biased towards any individual, people group, or even nation? Are your assumptions influencing your current perspectives? And after you do all of that, then you're going to begin to reconstruct. And I've heard it called, I've heard it called critical self-reflexive multiculturalism. I know that sounds very academic, but I want you to just think about that as looking at yourself in order to look at the different cultures around you that you have been in or have been encountered with, and whether or not you have any biases or prejudices when you look back. Okay, so when you reconstruct, you're going to put together your own philosophy of life, your mission. What are you called to? And be excited about it. You're going to base your philosophy or your practices on your values and your principles. What is most important to you? You need to know that before you go out into the workforce. You need to know what's valuable to you. Values are not beliefs. Values are what we place our time, energy, and money into. So don't say you believe something and you value it if you're not putting time and energy into it. And that's how we build our philosophy and look at our personal goal in life. Now, something else that's very important is to connect with the changing world and society. Remember I mentioned John Dewey a little bit back? Well, John Dewey, this was way back in 1884, actually before my time, and he began with a teaching philosophy and psychology. But then his interest gradually began to shift, and he moved to a different college that was much more diversified, and he got much more involved in education. That happened with me, actually. When we came back from Russia, as you heard in my introduction, I began looking around at things in my own country that I hadn't realized, just the huge number of immigrants, but mostly the huge number of refugees. And there was such a great need for these refugees to learn to speak English, to adapt to a new culture. And so I first got my certificate so that I could begin teaching, but then I went back and got my master's degree because I loved it so much. So sometimes when you connect with the changing world and society, your ideas may begin to change. Even right now in this COVID situation, we're all looking at different things. We have a changing society right now. We don't know how long it will last, but we have to try to adapt. That's why we're here on YouTube Live. And there are other things that you may have to look into according to your profession that has changed or might change during this COVID situation that we're in. Some people say COVID may not go away. So we need to be open-minded and think about the changes that are taking place. We need to dream dreams and set goals. Don't ever stop doing that. That's very important. All right, and this all takes place in your reconstruction, when you put things back together and you think about, well, what do I really value? What is my philosophy about life? What am I here on this earth for? And you'll also think about the changing society. Okay, what will the world look like in years to come? This is another part of reconstruction. Will it be a smaller world because of technology and transportation? Will we still be on information and media overload? What about global economic swings or the strains on basic resources like food or water or even air? Okay, global cooperation or non-cooperation, concerns about privacy, competitiveness, equality, equity. We are going to be living in an even more diverse culture when teams in some organizations will be from all around the world working together virtually. We'll need to think of better time management skills, and also marketing trends that are changing. So I know that all of you listening today are from many different fields, many different majors, but this is important for you to do no matter what your major is, whether you're going to be a teacher or an engineer or a physicist. You need to look at these things and think about yourself and then what is in store for the future. All right, so this is the next step after your I am from poem. This is the next exercise that I'm going to give you before we have our next class tomorrow. You're going to brainstorm life experiences. This is part of getting ready. Looking back over what you have learned, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. How did it change you? Do you have a different perspective on something because of a life experience? How have these events transformed your views or character? Now, I decided to do a brainstorming activity for you so that you could get an idea of what I'm talking about. So get out a piece of paper when you finish this session and start writing down all the different experiences that you have had in high school, college, inside of school, outside of school, internships, work experiences. Brainstorming means everything you can think of. You write them all down, just as I've done here. Okay, so you know a little bit more about me here by looking. I'm not going to leave this on the screen very long, but I want you to think about, this is what brainstorming activities is. I have my degrees there, my siblings, traveling, years that I spent here or there. Every experience is important. The most important attitude that you can have is the desire to go on learning. And I think as you learn, you're going to put all of these things together. That's the importance of the exercises that we're doing today. After you've brainstormed your experiences, I want you to ask yourself this question: what skills do you need to be successful in this world? We've already looked at what the world may look like. Now we have to think about what skills are needed. I'm going to give you an idea of some of the skills that employers are looking for in the 21st century. There are more, but these for sure you have to keep in mind. First of all, critical thinking and problem solving, very important. Creativity and innovation. Collaboration and cross-cultural interaction. Communication. And some people look at these as the 4 C's. So we could stop there and we could say, okay, there's 4 things that I need to be like, but I think there are more. So I'm going to extend this list and add a few more things that are important for the workforce that we are in today and maybe in tomorrow. Initiative, taking the initiative, and self-direction, because not every employer wants to have to tell you everything to do. Productivity and accountability. Leadership and responsibility. Flexibility and adaptability. Turning failures into the best teachers. We're going to use these tomorrow in our resume writing, as well as the next day as we look at interviewing. So these are very important for you to take a look at, and then we're going to match these with our experiences that we have just brainstormed about. I'm going to give you an example. This is one of my experiences that I just chose. You're going to do this with each one of yours. I lived in 2 countries and 7 states just while I was growing up, before I graduated from high school. All right, so then I had to think about, well, what did I learn? What are some of the skills that I acquired by doing this? Well, I had to adapt to different places, different foods, spicy food in Andhra Pradesh. I had to learn French as a second language. I communicated often cross-culturally. I learned to be flexible with my plans. And I learned that learning never stops. So these are things that I am going to associate with my different experiences. You're going to do this with each of your experiences. You're going to look at the skills and things that you learned when you experienced or when you accomplished something. All right, this is just an example. Now, if in the end, when the interviewer asks me about something cross-culturally, I'll be able to look at the different places where I lived and have those stories easily in my mind to relate to him. So this is how you might do like a mind map when you're brainstorming your experiences and putting skills to your experiences. Hope that's helpful. Okay? Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. So that's why we're looking back. Reflection without learning is dangerous. So put those 2 things together. When you reflect, you want to learn. It's a type of engagement. It informs your practices and your outlooks and your insights. So let me summarize that before we go on. The purpose of reflection then is to understand yourself, which will help you understand others, which will help you understand the system, which will help you understand society, which will give you a new perspective, a new way of looking at things. I see English very differently through my learner's eyes than through my own. And so you want to begin to look at people and situations a little bit differently. You know, there was something else that Dewey said. I don't have it on a slide, but I want you to listen to this quote that Dewey said, "The challenge to human life, therefore, is to determine how to live well with processes of change, not somehow to transcend them." And this is a really good quote for us right now in this COVID situation. We can't get above it. We have to face it. So we have to learn to live well in the process of change. It's a good word for us. So don't ignore it because it's not going to go away. We have to progressively look into what I might need to change or develop or learn to do. You know, my son, who is probably many of your own age, he's 23, and he just got a new job the end of March. So he started right at the beginning of lockdown. And even though he was interviewed in person before, about a month earlier, he had to start his job online. And he said to me, he said, all of a sudden I find myself becoming a really good Googler. I had to learn how to do Adobe Connect or Adobe in different ways. There were all kinds of things. So this is something that we really have to face and be aware of. I think awareness is such a crucial key because it helps us develop through reflection. Because reflection, as you probably already guessed, is professional development. And that's what you're here for today, to develop your profession and your career. And reflection is a big part of this. All right? So what do? We plan, we learn, we do something, we assess it, and then we do it all over again because we make changes. And it's not linear. We don't just have to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. No, we can plan and do it. Oh, then we have to go back and learn. But then we better assess. So this is all a part of professional development. Reflection helps us to learn to open ourselves up to biases and our outlooks, our perspectives. Reflection helps us to analyze our experiences. And reflection assists us in evaluating the job market, because when we begin to reflect and we begin to think about what the world is going to be like or what is like right now, we start to say, look at these job opportunities. I need to change some of my qualifications. I need to work on something else. So this is what we've talked about so far. But there's one more, as I promised you, there's one more part of reflection that's really important. And that is metacognitive development. The awareness and understanding of our own thoughts and learning processes. Okay, so we need to make that space to think about, how do I learn? How do I process information? How do I observe something? How do I decide what my opinion is? This is really important right now. And reflection develops our metacognitive development. Okay, so we're going to ask ourselves certain questions. My students laugh at me because whenever we do an exercise, I say to them, so what did you notice? Because I want them to think about what they just did. Why did I do it? And that's what you're going to be asking yourself when you look at your own experiences. Why did I do that? What was the result? Was this practical? Was it impractical? You might even ask that after you finish this webinar today. All right, what did I notice? What can I use? Some things I'm going to leave behind, some things I'm going to grab a hold of. Was this webinar, was this exercise useful? Was it practical? Was it impractical? You're going to ask yourselves a lot of questions. What you're noticing, what you're wondering, what you're feeling and thinking. Okay? Self-reflection. All right? Now, there's one more thing. Of course, I'm almost finished, but not quite, because there is one exercise that will help you in all 3 of these webinars. You can't finish that today, but I want you to think about it. It's a creative reflection called portfolios. And I'm sure you've heard this word before. And sometimes we think about this briefcase and an architecture comes in and sits at the table and opens his briefcase. And he shows all the pictures of the designs that he has developed. And he is showing how creative he is, all of the work that he has done. But you can begin to put together your own portfolio, okay? All of your insights into your history and experience can lead you to develop a portfolio that is a synopsis of the work that you have accomplished. I had to do one when I graduated with my master's degree, and I did it online with Google Sites. So there are many of online ways to do it, but depending on the purpose of your portfolio, there are many different sites that you can use and different ways that you can look at it. All right. I had to do my portfolio with a collection of my best work over the 2 years that I was working on my master's degree. So it also helps you to look at the things that you did not do so well. Don't be afraid to look at your failures, your weaknesses, the assignments that you didn't get such a great grade on. Don't be afraid to look at those things. And you're looking at them to reflect on your own work and your own learning processes, not to compare yourself with others. Okay? So I think it was Theodore Roosevelt in the beginning of the 20th century. He was one of our presidents. He said, comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself to others. Just look at your own work and don't spend too much time, as you'll know on the next couple of days as we do resumes and interviews, don't spend too much time looking at other people's resumes. I'm going to give you a few examples. And even in portfolios, you can look at some examples, but don't copy someone's. Be the unique individual you are and look at your own work, your own life experiences, and what you have gained from those experiences. Because no one else, just think about it, no one else in this whole world has had the experiences that you have had. You are unique individuals with so much to offer. And our task over the next 3 days, including today, is to bring those to light, to help you see them, to help you see, oh, wow, yeah, I really did do that. All right. So a portfolio is one way to be creative in looking at your work. And you might want to think about that. We're not going to spend a whole session on it, but it is something that you can begin to look at. Okay. I think we're coming to a close. I want you to remember, first of all, to also do the quiz that you will get. If you registered, then you will receive a quiz. And all 3 quizzes have to be done in order to get the e-certificate. If you don't care about the certificate, you don't have to do the quiz. But it'll help you remember some of the things that we went over. So do the quiz. And then in just a moment, we're going to look at the questions that have been processed on the chat, and we're going to have some questions. So if you have a question, take time right now and put your questions into the chat, and I'm going to answer them. All right, let's get to it. Thank you, and I'm going to begin again. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Mahati asked me to please repeat the quote. It was such a great quote, and I'm so glad that she asked me to do that. I didn't have it on one of the slides, and I'll be sure to do that next time. So Dewey maintained, quote, "The challenge to human life, therefore, is to determine how to live well with processes of change, not somehow to transcend them," unquote. And I think that's so important. And that's what we're doing, right? We're looking at how our life has changed, and we're not trying to avoid anything, because even the bad things that happen in our life we've learned from, we've moved on, we've gained compassion or empathy, whatever has taken place in our lives, whatever God has done in our lives, we are at a different place. And that's really what deconstruction is all about. Shandini asked me about, to explain once again, deconstruction and reconstruction. And so I want you to remember that deconstruction is not destroying something, not pretending that something didn't happen in your life, but rather it's taking things apart so you can look at them, so you can determine what are your values, what are your principles, what are you aiming for, why are you here on this earth, because it's going to help to reconstruct. After we look at everything, and that's what deconstruction is, not throwing away everything, but taking it apart so we can look at it. Then we're going to put back together, reconstruct our philosophy of living, our mission in life. What are our priorities? What kind of job do I really want to be involved in and pursue? What kind of company do I want to be involved in where I can really be a part of what's happening? So that's deconstruction and reconstruction. And I think that sort of answers Christina's question also. Christina asked what all of this has to do with the job search. Okay, that's a great question because we're being rather philosophical and looking at things that you don't usually sit down and think about when you begin to put your resume together or go for a job. But I really want you to look at yourself. Like I said, not just to get to know yourself better, but to think about what you want to pursue in life and what you want to be a part of. Because if you have really looked at these things, they will be a part of you. As I said, what's in the heart is what's going to come out. So you want to really look at these things in order to be ready to write your resume as well as have the interview. So I think all of this will come together tomorrow and the next day, but there is a plan, there is a rhyme and a reason for what you're doing today. So be sure to do, even if you don't write the I am from poem to look at your past, please take the time to brainstorm your experiences because we're going to put all of those together tomorrow. I also have somebody just sent in some questions on WhatsApp to Dr. Suda. So Betsy Paul asked how cross-cultural interactions contribute to the professional development. Great questions. Thank you, Betsy. This world that we are looking at, remember when we looked at how the world may change in years to come, and one of the things was the small world and the diversity. So more and more in the job force, we are put together on a team. And sometimes that team comes from all around the world. And you might be interacting virtually with people from many different countries. And so learning to interact with them, understanding other cultures is going to help you to be a very good, strong member of a team, a diverse team. So that's one of the ways that we develop, is to learn to be multicultural. Remember I talked about self-reflexive multiculturalism, and that is sometimes we grew up with one group of people. And as we grow up, we want to learn to interact with all kinds of groups of people. And that will help us be more professional and global. All right, somebody else asked, Shraboni asked, how English language can reconstruct the past COVID situation of the job. Okay, well, first of all, we are not past COVID-19, are we? We seem to be right in the midst of it. So we are trying to learn a lot of different things during this time. And in fact, when we talk about questions day after tomorrow, we are going to be looking at questions that interviewers might ask you. And they may ask you, what have you done during COVID-19? What have you done during lockdown? How have you made use of your time? The English language is used so much. It's a common language for many people. So there are many things that I can't learn in other languages. And so in developing my character, in developing my job skills, I may need to read some information in the English language. And so the COVID situation makes the internet much more available, and there's so much, I'm not sure of the percentage, but a great deal of the internet information is in English. And so it's going to help us to improve our skills while we're on lockdown, get ready for post-COVID or our new normal, whatever that's going to look like. And it's going to help us develop in many different dimensions. Thanks, Shraboni, for that question. And another one was some tips to improve communication skills. Good question. And I think I'm not going to say too much about that. I could do a whole lecture on communication skills. I'm an English language teacher. So let's look at that, especially during the session on interviews, because we'll be doing a lot of communication back and forth. So I'll make sure to cover that the day after tomorrow. But one thing I will say, not to avoid your question, I will say, remember that communication is meant to be two-way. I couldn't even continue with this if I didn't have your questions. Remember, we're going both ways. So we have to be good listeners, we have to be good receivers, we have to be good negotiators of meaning. There are so many skills that we can improve on even while we're in lockdown in different languages, just to be a good communicator, someone who listens, someone who doesn't always think that they're right. So good question about communication, and we'll be talking more about that. Okay, we care about society and what they think. Before doing anything, we first think. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking, Kushi, Jane. Why we care? Well, I'll tell you, because we live, why do we care about society and what they think? Because we live in society, right? We're not hermits. We don't live alone on an isolated island. We have a lot of people that we have to associate with. We don't have to always agree with them, but people are so unique and so different, and we do need to learn to be good listeners, and we need to be in touch with how society is changing, right? That's why we're here doing a webinar, because things have changed. I'm not in the classroom right now. I'm here before you. And so if I didn't pay attention to what's happening in society, I'd just be at home, maybe working on some curriculum, waiting for the day when I can be back in the classroom. But things are different. So I think it's important to understand we don't always have to agree with things that are going on in society, but I think in order to be informed, we need to listen. And we do need to care. I need to care about what's happening to people in India and people around the world, no matter how different they are from me, because I can learn from everyone. To never stop learning is one of the most important things. Good questions. Okay, you'll have time to think of some questions for tomorrow when we talk about resumes. Oh, no, a couple more questions came in. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to give you an email address where you can write if you need to ask a question or something after we have finished this webinar. Okay, Naresh. Oh, well, I think, okay, his question is about being a structuralist and how we are that in life, and how to apply deconstruction if we're trying to structure. And maybe we shouldn't think too much about taking apart to destroy. We're taking apart to look at in order to rebuild. So I have to really understand where some of my beliefs and my ideas come from. Let's just take one of the questions that I just had about society. So if I were deconstructing, even if I am a structuralist, if I were looking at my life, I would think, okay, now where did that belief come from? And what are the ramifications of that belief? And so I'm looking to get a more clear picture of who I am, what I believe, what my principles are, and in order to structure my philosophy of life and my career path that I want to go on. Because part of the career path is thinking, if I want to be this in 5 or 10 years, what are the steps that I have to take in order to get there? But I'm looking back in order to move forward, not to regret the past, not to try to change the past, but to learn from the past. So I hope that answers your question, Naresh. Thank you. And Meghana, How to set a fixed goal. Well, it looks like right now, today, in this day and age, our goals shouldn't be too fixed, right? When I came to India 9 months ago, I really had some goals of wanting to impact and influence the community at St. Joseph's, and which has over 2,000 students. But now we're in a whole different atmosphere, environment. And so I'm not sure that our goals should be entirely fixed, whether you're in India, the United States, or some other country. But it's a good question, how to set a goal. And maybe as we look at the resume writing tomorrow, that will help you to think about the goals. So I would go back to the one slide where I was talking about reconstructing, where you want to look at your beliefs and you want to put together a philosophy of life that has to do with your values, your principles. And that's how you're going to start with your goal. And your goals may change. So I wouldn't suggest that you have them too fixed. Okay. All right. We still have a little bit of time. Thank you for setting aside this space to reflect, to learn, and to listen. Soumya asked, in this competitive world, how can one be a successful person without any diversion? Well, first of all, that would take defining what you mean by success, right? And that's one of the questions that I have on our third day, one of the interview questions, because very often an employer does ask, what does success mean to you? Because success looks different. And I think that's one of the things when you're reconstructing that's a good question that you can ask yourself. Remember I talked about asking good questions? Well, this is a great question. How do I look at success? Is success to me making a lot of money? Is success to me fulfilling what I feel God put me on this earth to do? Is success about being popular or famous? What does success mean to you? So that's the first part of this question, Soumya, that I think you have to make sure that you understand in your own life. What does success mean to you? And in this competitive society, the truth is, because you're all unique individuals, I would hope that your dream, your goal, is a little bit different than someone else's. So even though it's very competitive, we can learn from one another, and we can try to diversify some of our thoughts. So if you're pursuing a career in, let's just say, human resource management, and there are several hundred other people doing that, and maybe even applying for the same job, look at some of the aspects, look at the job description, and look at some of the qualifications that they're looking for. How do you fill those? And what makes you different than other people applying for this job? And that's what you're going to try to expand upon when you write your resume and when you go for the interview. So how can you be successful? Maybe by starting with fewer expectations, and then, because sometimes assumptions are expectations, and then those expectations aren't met and we're disappointed. But instead of being disappointed by expectations that aren't met, perhaps you can change your expectation. Think of it differently. Look at other opportunities. So I really think that it's important that when you're deconstructing, that you look at who you are and what you're called to. And that changes in life. I mean, I used to work for nonprofit organizations. And as my introducer said, I spent 11 years in Central Russia and started a nonprofit organization there for women. And then when I came back to the US in 2009, as I looked at society and even what I was doing, there was just something inside of me that wanted to be with people all around the world. and I realized how important the English language was. How it cannot be just, some people think of it in a negative sense, but I think of English as a door of opportunity. And so when you're being competitive, you may want to think about other opportunities that can be opened. I think I could go on and on about that question, Soumya. Good question, but I'm going to move on. Geetha asked, how to speak fluently. Okay, now, first of all, remember that fluency and accuracy are two different things. Okay? Accuracy is not making any mistakes. Well, we're all perfect. I made some mistakes, I'm sure, while I was speaking, and we were trying to do all of our technical issues, okay? That's accuracy. Fluency is being able to express yourself where people can understand, to negotiate meaning, to make sure that you know how to ask for clarity or clarify something for somebody else. So there's many different things that you can work on, but practice is a really good way to become more fluent, to practice speaking and not worry about making mistakes and learning some of the strategies. That's what metacognitive development is all about. Learning how you learn. And if you recognize some of the ways that you learn, you'll be able to practice those things in order to become fluent. So practice is a very big key. Ramya asked how to, that's sort of the same question, how to improve the English language and communication. I would say by listening, by practicing, and by speaking. I mean, when I practice my presentations, I go into my room by myself and I speak out loud. So you have to do that. Preparation and practice are two things that people skip. And if they don't prepare and they don't practice, they're not confident and they feel that they can't do something. So be prepared and practice. What about employment after lockdown? Well, that's a question that I'm not prepared to answer. We have to stay in touch with what's going on in society and keep up to date with our own field of our profession, our career. Keep up to date with that and learn new things. Always keep learning. Very important. So we don't know what employment will be like after lockdown, do we? None of us. Okay? So I stay busy and productive and try to learn new things every day. Okay, Dr. Goswami. Is the knowledge of a regional language necessary to learn a foreign language? Well, I have studied 4 languages and now I'm on my 5th, and I'm not doing very well on my 5th. I wonder if it has to do with age. But right now I'm trying to learn some phrases in Telugu. I think learning the language that is going to help you communicate with people is what's most important. And if that means learning something regional or a dialect, then you do learn parts of that, yes. But otherwise, I would learn very general. For example, we have different Englishes, but we have many similarities. We have more similarities than we have differences when we think of Indian English and American English and British English and Australian English, etc. Okay, we still have more similarities. So we don't refer anymore these days to standard English. So we just want to learn English, and wherever you're going to be communicating, try to be the best communicator that you can. Sometimes that does mean learning some dialectical phrases, but I don't think that important unless you're going to be in a small community where that dialect or that regional language is spoken. I hope that answers your question. But I'm going to give you an email to write me to clarify things. Okay, honey, if we have big goals and a short time, how can we achieve it? Oh, that's a tough one because big goals are hard to do quickly. I'm a person who likes to dream big. I like to look at big pictures. But I also realize that when I have a big picture or I have a big goal, I have to take the first step. If you skip steps, it's like climbing up a ladder. And if you skip a couple of steps, you're going to fall down. So you can't be too quick. You've got to take the first steps and then watch things develop. And I also like to include God in some of my big goals, big dreams, because I do like to dream things that are bigger than my little self. But I have to take the first steps, and I have to be faithful in the little things. Okay, on WhatsApp, another question came in, so I don't have a name. How do we master in developing the etiquettes over professional development? Once again, you can read about professional etiquette, and you can watch webinars such as this one. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about resumes, and then the next day interviews. So we're going to be talking about some etiquettes that are involved in communication and relationships and interactions. So, but you can also read about that. But I think you need to ask questions, and you need to be open. That's a really good question. How can I be polite? And in different countries are so different. So I think you have to educate yourself on different professional etiquettes around the world. Good questions. I'm hoping I'm not losing these because they're bringing them and piling them in front of me. But we still have 10 minutes. So, Soji, how to have better communication. So I think I've answered that. Okay. Practice, and then practice, and then practice some more. And by yourself, with others, and you can even do that with YouTube. I mean, there are some things that we really do have a lot more opportunities. If you were watching a YouTube video, you can pause it and try to repeat them. And because it's not just learning words, is it? It's learning stress, intonation, rhythm. I teach all those things when we're having regular class. All the different meanings that a sentence can have depending on the stress that you put on the different words. So practice and listening and even mimicking. And, some of the sounds that we make in English are different, and you have to exercise your mouth in order to make them sometimes. And Cicely asked, again, how to develop our soft skills and practice in our daily life. Well, first of all, soft skills, everything I'm reading nowadays, employers are more interested in soft skills than anything else. There are, of course, certain hard skills that you have to know for certain jobs. I have a client who I tutor in English, and he lives in China, and he's been with a very large corporation for a long time, and he's really quite advanced in his English. But he has even said the marketing trends are more towards customer service and relations and interactions. So soft skills are very important. And I know it's hard right now. You're at home alone, but you can still practice reading out loud, practicing your stress, your intonation, the rhythm, to speak in thought groups and not just individual words. Perhaps we can do a webinar sometime on communication, presentation skills, and interaction, so that you can even practice some of the things, mannerisms with me. All right, another question. How to get away from being nervous, and we're going to talk about that. So I won't say too much about that, but whether you're doing a presentation or whether you're getting ready for an interview, being prepared, and that's why you're watching this webinar, you're preparing yourself, and then practicing and knowing what you're going to talk about. So don't think that today was any kind of a wasted exercise. Brainstorm your experiences. Think about where you came from. Sayings that, my father always used to say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And, I'm pretty old now, but I still remember that. And it's important. And so get in touch with these things that you feel strongly about before the resume and the interview, and it will give you much confidence. being prepared. One of my clients, also in China, a lady, she's getting ready to interview for a new job in Hong Kong. And so she knows she needs to really work on her English. And she even told me, I was so afraid of these interview questions, but now when I'm talking to you about them and practicing them, I feel much more confident I can answer them. So you don't want to miss the next 2 sessions. They all work together. Is personality development useful for career development? Well, I don't know about personality development, but I do believe that we can work on some character traits, that we can, as we're deconstructing, look at beliefs that I have, assumptions that I have, and I need to change. And so I guess that is sort of personality development, but I don't want you to change your personality. I just want you to develop your character and be the person, the best you that you can be. Thanks, Bhargavi. All right, how to overcome a situation when you don't have enough skills. Well, we will be talking about that over the next 2 days, because there will be jobs that you want to apply for and you're thinking, oh, I don't have all of the skills, but I really want this job. Okay, so there are ways to show your willingness to learn and your readiness. Okay, I didn't feel completely qualified to come here to St. Joseph's College when I was in America, but I knew it was what I wanted to do. I knew it was what God was calling me to do, to be a part of the mission and the vision here at St. Joseph's. And so I did have to be a little bit convincing in a couple of the interview questions. You could call that, I suppose, fake it till you make it. But I think actions and feelings come together, and we'll talk about that more. Okay. And how to lose my fear while speaking is, again, practice. What are the things that should be written in a resume? We're going to go over every single detail tomorrow, and I hope it won't be boring. I think I've put together an interesting presentation on writing a winning resume. Learning vocabulary. There are different techniques in learning vocabulary. And so I don't have time to talk about all of those techniques, but if you send me an email, I will write to you about some of those ideas. All right, a big goal, short time. I think I answered that. All right. Okay. How to stay motivated during hurdles is to stay focused on what's most important in your life, what you really feel called to, what you really feel is important, your priority. So when you come up to a hurdle or an obstacle or a hiccup, as we call it, it will be easier to face that and get over the hurdle in order to get to the goal. Okay. How to, Centurity asked me about how to satisfy ourselves with our job and a salary when we compare with others in the locality and people are maybe getting paid more or, money is really not one of my greatest values, nor am I very good at managing money. If I have money, I spend it, and if I don't have money, I don't spend it. So I'm not a great one to ask about that, but I do want to say that that's why I want you to get in touch with yourselves and your priorities and where you're going, because then you'll be satisfied with what you're doing, no matter what other people are making. You're a unique individual, and you are called to something that nobody else can do. What I'm doing right now is what I'm supposed to be doing, and we all do it. Maybe even if we do something simple, has a good, positive outlook on life, because negative thoughts do come and doubts come. That doesn't mean they're bad, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're bad. So I don't want to just say, oh, think positive. No, sometimes you have to talk to somebody, and sometimes you do have to go back to the things that you have established as true and positive in your life. Okay, so I think for the most part I've answered those. I want to give you an email address that won't be too full so I can see if you have another question. No, I'm going to give you the language centers because otherwise your emails will get lost in my personal. So I'm going to give you, the St. Joseph's College is starting a language center, and we have an email address, and that one is not so full, and I'll be able to notice your emails much more readily. So I think she's going to put it up in the chat or somewhere for you to see. It is LANGCTR, full stop, SJCW, Language Center at St. Joseph's College, but abbreviated, okay? Lang Center, full stop, SJCW at gmail.com. I'll give it to you again tomorrow in case you can, if you have another question or if there's something that you wanted me to send you, please drop me a line. And please try to work on your homework a little bit so that you're ready for tomorrow, because we're going to build on the information. We're going to be structuralists, and we're going to build on what you did today. All right. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a great joy. And thank you for all your wonderful comments, and we will continue tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon.
Okay, all of you, a very good afternoon, and I hope all of you have enjoyed the session. And I think it will be a very resourceful session for all of you all. And to tell you just a little thing, that all of you tomorrow, you'll be receiving another session ID to your registered mail ID for the second session, entitled Writing a Winning Resume, right? So tomorrow again we will meet live in YouTube, and another ID will be given to you. So it will be sent to your registered mail ID. Please keep checking your mail IDs.